Today, we're going to talk about what might be the most notorious use case for crypto ever and what a very big player in the crypto space thinks is also crypto's future: capital formation. If the only future in crypto you care about is the one where prices go up, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining, and apologies. I know in Europe, the time change in the spring happens much later in March. In parts of Australia, the time change has already happened. In Australia, outside of the Dene Nation, it never happens. Same for in Arizona. Sorry, in Arizona, it never happens. In Hawaii, it never happens. In a bunch of the territories, it never happens. So people are probably going to be very confused and trying to jump on and join this video at various times. So I apologize. This is always kind of a mess because everybody's changing times at different times, or they don't change depending on how close they are to the equator, all of those things. So apologies to everybody who probably try to tune in at the normal time, only to discover that most of North America, most of the North American population is changing the actual time at a different time than them, or where they're not changing at all. Anyways, apologies for all that. Let's see who is in here. We've got a few people in here. That's a good sign. Bonjour. Cardano from the Win is here. It says bonjour to everybody. Where's everybody? Am I first? You were first. You were first. Brown Beardo is here. Hola. Happy Sunday, streamers. Hola. Neo Chad says third. Let's go. Neo Chad has got a bundle of money, just like in the thumbnail. Yep. Brown Beardo, AOS types furiously. I heard there's new proposals for the Treasury. Yeah, we're going to talk about a few of them. It's going to be we won't be able to cover much. Those are also new. I won't be able to really talk substantively about them, but the ones we're going to cover are all of the same genre, so we can talk generally about that. Brown Beardo says, sweat dripping. Amaru Info Action is still active, and I also just heard about another one. There are two more. J Coco, Ayo, how's it going? 2110, yo, thank you for joining. Electric Grace, let's go AOS. Price of oil going crazy. Wish it was the price of ADA. Me too. You mean Cardano budget process framework? That's right. We're using a lot of euphemisms. As soon as governance came in, we started using a lot of euphemisms in crypto. I think in Cardano. In crypto, there have always been a lot of euphemisms. We speak euphemistically, sometimes for regulatory purposes, but there's always been a lot of euphemistic expression in crypto. But now that governance has come into Cardano, the euphemisms have gone into hyperdrive. We have a lot of euphemistic language now. Jose Cano says, hello, just got my first midnight drop from the scavenger mine a few days ago. Let's go, Jose. Yeah, I guess all of mine are in now too. I haven't picked up I only had like two sort of big ones. There were two that were sort of big bags. I picked up one of them that happened sort of last month, and I had one, I believe, in the last couple of days. I haven't even picked it up yet, but same kind of deal. Hey, Omar, greetings. Thanks for joining. Elliot Adams says, it's a happy day when I find an old penny at this point. I'm with you. I'm with you on that, my friend. I'm with you on that. Joe Davidson, hello. Thank you for joining. So here's what we're talking about tonight. And we're gonna talk about the governance stuff a little bit. That's gonna be an ongoing thing we'll talk about quite a bit, of course. Hey Kwong, I have no goddamn clue, my man, my friend. I don't know if you're a man, whatever gender, but you definitely have a male in your profile pic, so I'll just assume that. But I have no idea. I don't really believe anybody else does either, right? It's like nobody knew what was going to happen in 2025. You had all kinds of people making all kinds of predictions in 2025. Nobody really called 2025. I don't believe anybody knows. Okay, yeah, I guess right. So I didn't want to insult any. I don't want to insult anybody if I'm assuming they're a dude and they're not a dude. But Yeah, no, I don't think anybody really knows. Brown Beardo put it well. Everybody tries to do this, and often they do the exact opposite. So, yeah, I'm not the guy who's ever going to give you advice about when to buy or sell anything on this channel. We just kind of talk about it, and we talk about the various goings-ons, and everybody can kind of make their own decision. Bindo Cam, thank you for joining. So, what we're talking about here is the history of crypto has involved a certain use case for crypto. And as much as we, especially on this channel, I talk about doing real business on the blockchain. That's like been one of the big themes of this channel for a long time, but especially the last year or so. We've talked a lot about doing real business on the blockchain and no more of this nonsense speculation stuff. But when you think about, if you're thinking accurately about the history of crypto, the biggest use case in crypto historically, and I hate to say this, I'm gonna say something bad about crypto here, but the biggest use case historically has been regulatory arbitrage related to capital formation. So one of the big reasons crypto blew up in the, after the sort of the Ethereum innovation, right? After we got smart contracts and you could actually launch coins and have ICOs, one of the big things that happened was people realized they could avoid a very particular securities regulation. Hola, Rulo. How's it going? Thanks for joining. Hola. So, in securities regulation, we have this category of people called accredited investors. And you got to be a rich guy. I've talked about this many times on this channel, but and we've gone through the exact requirements to be regarded as an accredited investor. But you basically got to be a rich guy or be making a lot of money. You got to have a bunch of money in the bank or be making a bunch of money or be kind of a securities professional. And the whole idea is that the regulations and the law need to worry less about sophisticated investors. And the regulations of the law kind of assume that somebody's a sophisticated investor if they're like, we'll just say generally a stockbroker, that can mean a lot of different things these days. But if you're a securities professional, or if you have a lot of money in the bank, or if you're making a lot of money, they're like, we're going to worry less about you. We're really worried. The example they always give in securities regulation is the little old grandma, right? They're always worried about the little old grandma who might be tricked by securities charlatans who just want to fleece her of her money. And they do exist. Those very, very much do exist in the regular TradFi securities world, and they very, very much do exist in the crypto world. But what happened in crypto is crypto just started doing these ICOs, and there was never a notion of accredited investors versus non-accredited investors. Why? Because crypto addresses are pseudonymous, right? We don't give any information, at least back in those days, and even normally today, we don't give any information beyond our address. There's just an address. And if there's a crypto asset, you either buy it or you don't. And that's usually about all the information a crypto project gets from, the human, presumably on the other end of that address. So there is no KYC, there is no AML, there is no accredited investor. So we now know in 2026, there are crypto projects that have all those things, right? That definitely happens in crypto. If you try to use a centralized exchange front end, off ramp or on ramp, you're going to get KYC'd, right? Unless it's in sort of an unregulated jurisdiction. You're going to get KYC'd. You're going to do they're going to do AML stuff. They're going to do all that stuff. But in the ICOs, one of the reasons crypto blew up, this notorious use case that caused crypto to blow up, was there were no more accredited investor qualifications required in crypto ICOs. So what happened? All the normal people like me and you could suddenly invest in early stage ventures. This is something you couldn't really do unless you were an accredited investor in the TradFi world, right? Guys like you and me couldn't just go. I mean, there's certain exemptions, certain times when it can happen, but generally we couldn't, some founder couldn't just come out and say, hey, I just founded this company, taking taking everybody, taking all money. Who wants to invest? $500, $1,000, $10,000, $30,000. I'll take all the money. They can't do that because we have this accredited investor thing. Later on, more recently, especially during the lifetime of crypto, sort of in the last 15 years, the SEC saw what was going on in crypto, and for a lot of other reasons as well. They came up with some new exemptions that allowed companies to take, a lot of money, within certain limitations from a lot of people who weren't accredited investors. But the big notorious use case in crypto was that crypto founders could do capital formation. They could get together a whole bunch of money from a lot of small investors and just sort of ignore this whole accredited investor thing. So what did this result in? This resulted in a lot of good things, like a lot of people like me and a lot of you who wouldn't be considered accredited investors could all of a sudden get in on very early stage ventures, right? These crypto projects. You could buy Ethereum. You could buy Cardano. You could buy any of these, thousands of thousands. And now at this point, I think tens of thousands of different crypto projects early on. And you could see those crazy gains, those delicious, succulent gains, right? You could have those 100x moments that would have been very hard to have in the TradFi world. That was the notorious use case for crypto, right? And I say notorious and not famous for a reason, because it's really regulatory arbitrage, right? It's like the same guys who would have loved to do that in the TradFi world and just issued securities for dollars and ignore the accredited investor regulations. They couldn't do it in the TradFi world. It was illegal. So they did it in the crypto world, right? That was all the good. The good part of it for us in retail was we got to get in on these early stage ventures. The bad part of it was exactly the reason the accredited investor regulations were created, and that's that there was no protection for unsophisticated investors. So really small investors got fleeced. It's a big theme on this channel. The robbery forest was born, right? And you had not just the kind of robbery forest straight up exploit theft events. You also had ICOs where people collected a lot of money, did a whole bunch of capital formation. They had, some kind of a white paper or business plan of some type, a lot of promises, and they just did nothing. They just did nothing with the money. They just kept it and spent it. Exactly the kind of thing the securities regulations were meant to avoid. So this has been going on all these years in crypto. The reason why I'm talking about it today is this post from our friend Brian Armstrong over at Coinbase. Some of you will be scoffing at that, saying he's not your friend. Fair enough. But Brian Armstrong posted this: crypto will break down barriers around fundraising and capital formation next. Yo, Brian, crypto has been doing that for a long time. That's been the entire fucking story of crypto. Breaking down barriers around capital formation. Reducing friction around fundraising will increase the number of startups in the world, accelerating progress. Every entrepreneur knows how time-consuming and expensive fundraising can be. That's because Coinbase, even though it's a crypto company, Coinbase, is a publicly traded company. They're familiar with the whole TradFi securities world because they live as an entity. They live in that world. Even though their business is in our world, crypto, they're really a creature of TradFi securities regulations. That's why you see periodic reports from Coinbase on Edgar. You can go in and see their quarterlies. You can go look at their annual report, their K, see all their Qs, event reports, 8Ks, all that stuff, right? Because they're a creature of that whole world. So he's speaking as the CEO of a company that is very much a creature of that world, but his statement kind of like belies a lack of acknowledgement of what's really been going on in crypto all these years. And that's that this whole thing, reducing friction around fundraising, increasing the number of startups in the world, that's what crypto was. That's what crypto did. That's what the ICO era was. The reason why there are so damn many coins is because there was no friction. This part of that friction being the accredited investor hurdle we were talking about earlier, right? Much harder to raise when you got to go out and find rich guys and people making a lot of money and securities professionals who fit into the accredited investor definition. Much harder to raise. If you can just jump on the internet, say, hey, here's my website, here's my white paper, go ahead and send me a bunch of Bitcoin and I'll issue you Ethereum, or once Ethereum was around, it was issue me whatever, and I'll issue you this token I made up. Obviously a lot easier to raise. But I thought this was an interesting comment. It's kind of a sign of the times. The CEO of a publicly traded company, which exists on TradFi rails, but does its business in our world, is telling the world that the future is actually what's been going on for the last, over a decade. I thought this was a very interesting sign of the times. So I believe this will all get easier in crypto. I mean, part of regulatory clarity is going to be taking us out of the gray area. The reason why the regulatory arbitrage was going on was not because it was clear that it was legal in crypto. It's because nobody knew what laws applied to crypto, and a lot of people got in trouble with the SEC because of it. So what Brian's really saying is like, oh, that thing that we've been doing for the last 11 years that has really been the real actual use case of crypto, despite all of our rhetoric to the contrary, that thing we've actually been doing, it's actually going to be legal now. We can actually talk about it. We can actually say, hey, the whole reason, the vast majority of people got into crypto when it blew up during that era was because of this. This is really why everybody got in during the 2017 ICO craze, when crypto really, really started blowing up. This is the real reason. Now we've got guys like Brian Armstrong saying that's the future. I'm hoping that's, this is going to be a part of crypto's future, but I'm hoping it's not the primary thing in crypto. I'm hoping the primary thing in crypto is us doing real business, things that look like real fi. I hope that's the future of crypto. Okay, Family G7 says, okay, Brown Beardo. Wait, I'm missing a bunch. Okay. Hilldog says, hello all. Hello, Hilldog. Thank you for joining. Brown Beardo says, I don't think Brian ever watched Killer Whales. Tell me what that reference is. Tell me what the reference is. Yeah, but what the fuck is with all these stocks coming to sex platforms? I thought the idea was to bring crypto to stocks. So, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That's why Brian Armstrong is presenting this as something in the future, because he wants to be the platform where guys who would normally go to TradFi to do capital formation, he wants them to do it on Coinbase in the future. But it sort of belies his lack of acknowledgement of the fact that this is what we've been doing for the last 10 years. But that's the point. He has stocks on Coinbase now. And what he also wants to do is all of the capital formation for traditional companies, right? He wants traditional companies to do all their capital formation on Coinbase, right? DIY, bonsoir mes amis. Good evening. Good evening. We're actually getting quite a few people. I was a little bit worried we would miss out on a lot of people because of the time change, but actually we're doing okay. Okay, here we go. Killer Whales was a show modeled after Shark Tank for crypto projects. Didn't last long. It was kind of cringe. Okay, I thought I had heard of it. I thought I had heard of it. That sounds familiar now. Okay, I thought that was familiar. So anyways, this is what centralized exchanges are trying to sell, right? And it's kind of smart. They're just repackaging what we've already been doing for years. They're repackaging that for mainstream entrepreneurs in the future. And he's right. Everything he's writing is true. It's just, he's just not mentioning the fact that we've already been doing it for 10 years. And he doesn't want people to do it the way we've been doing it, the way crypto generically has been doing it. He wants everybody to do it on Coinbase, which is going to be, there's going to be a strong value prop there for people, mainstream entrepreneurs, to come in and do capital formation, do an initial capital formation event on Coinbase. That's gonna be, I'm sure they'll come up with all kinds of packages to make that work and easy for entrepreneurs. So everything he's writing here is true. It's just he just ignores the fact that we've been doing this, on a more decentralized basis for a long time. Joe Davidson says, it's wild that your videos are chronicles for the lived experiences of the crypto experience from the user's point of view. I try to keep it because I consider myself to be a regular retail user of crypto. So I think that's when you watch some crypto content, it's sort of like you can tell the person making the content is doing it very much from the perspective of a crypto entrepreneur or a crypto, project founder or whatever. And that's interesting too. But I mean, if I'm being honest, like the vast majority of people in crypto are just us regular retail people. And I think that's actually the more interesting experience because the project founders, it's like they've got it's interesting what they go through, but I'm more worried about retail. I'm more worried about us in retail than I am about, kind of the Brian Armstrongs of the world. And I know there's a very wide spectrum between him and some, starving Cardano project founder who, might have created a project that we all know of and use, but still is like making no money off it. So I feel for those guys too. I'm not saying I don't feel for them. All you need to know is Anthony Scaramucci, Mario Nafal, Wendy O, and Rand Nooner. Exactly. Yeah. 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 There you go. There's a bunch of people who do crypto content. Yeah, right there. Bunch of people. Okay. So this is Brian Armstrong is tipping his hat though. I think we're gonna see Brian Armstrong come out with a whole campaign aimed at mainstream entrepreneurs. And it's like, hey, come launch your company on Coinbase, issue a bunch of tokens. And what I worry about there is he'll be able to do that during this administration. And if a crypto-friendly administration gets back in after this current executive branch administration, then they'll be able to continue. But if not, if it's an anti-crypto army style White House after the next elections, not these midterm elections this year, but after that, the next elections, then what happens to a Coinbase? Do they, they flip flop? They have to turn all that off. Do they have regulators going after them? We just don't know. It's like very uncertain until we have Clarity Act and some kind of clear rules of the road. They're still kind of in this gray territory. Sure, Trump's not going to order the SEC to go after them. They're not going to crack down on them for this. But what happens during the next White House? That's the part we don't know. So, okay. Let's talk about some Cardano. I wanted to address that because I think that's going to be a big theme over the next couple of years. Obviously, that's where Coinbase is trying to go. But let's talk about Cardano proper, the thing we're all really here for. So this was actually really big news. Just in, Cardano ADA is now accepted as payment at 137 SPAR markets across Switzerland. Cardano Foundation secured the integration in partnership with DFX Swiss. Transactions are processed in real time. No centralized exchange needed. Very nice. DFX Swiss is the seamless gateway between fiat and crypto, bank to wallet, wallet to bank, easy, non-custodial, your keys, your coin. I don't know anything at all about DFX Swiss, but I like what they wrote there. Non-custodial, your keys, your coin, wallet to bank, easy, bank to wallet, easy. Okay, that sounds good. I'm the devil's in the details always when it comes to, centralized exchanges. They call themselves a seamless gateway, but I'm reading sort of centralized exchange there, whatever they are. They're obviously doing on-ramp, off-ramp stuff, but this sounds fantastic, right? I saw people in the comments, in Switzerland, Cardano people in Switzerland posting, now I can go buy my groceries with ADA. This is the kind of real business I think we need to be doing in Cardano. Obviously, this is pretty large scale, right? You've got a large supermarket chain, right? We need this not just across Switzerland, across all of Europe, across Asia, across Australia, across North America, Central America, South America. We just need to do this everywhere, and not just with big chains are great, but we need to get this going so that we can just have a Cardano economy. This is what we really need, in my opinion. So thank you, Cardano Foundation. I very much appreciate that you guys did this. So I hope a lot of people use it. We'll see. We'll see. Switzerland, not the biggest country in the world, but hey, we got to start somewhere, and Switzerland is a great place to start because they have long been our friends in crypto. You can say what you want about the Cardano or about the crypto foundation model in Switzerland and the shortcomings. Charles has talked a lot about that in the past, but still, at least Switzerland seems to like us. They seem to like us. Pucky Hawk, thank you for making it. Let's go. Let's go. So that's been going on. And also, so we recently learned that MoneyGram is sort of collaborating with us. This is fantastic. Not with me, not with Army of Spies channel, but with our whole ecosystem, with the entire ecosystem. And MoneyGram posted this on Friday. MoneyGram has been exploring crypto rails for years. This was kind of good to see, right? We all remember sort of the, the Dish Network experience, and it's like they pop up, it's all announced on stage, and then nothing ever happens and they disappear. So it's kind of comforting to see that this isn't their first foray into crypto. It's not like one charismatic salesperson talked them into this, and that emotion, will do the brightest candle burns quickest kind of thing, however that idiom goes. It looks like they have been serious about crypto. Based on this comment, they're at least trying to lead us to believe that they've been serious about crypto for a while. They've been looking into it for a long time. And so this is not just a flash in the pan thing that's going to come and go. I'm hoping that's true, but always encouraging to see this. So Family G7 says, yeah, the adoption part was great. That said, I'm worried about our governance system. We should hire a team of professionals to review our proposals and give us feedback every 2 weeks or monthly. So this is a really interesting question. I could do a whole video just talking about this. So the question is basically, yours is like sort of a subset of the questions involved in governance right now. So this subset is like, should we have a team of professionals that review proposals and give us feedback? When you say us, do you mean the DReps, or like this team of professionals would be paid for out of the treasury and they give the DReps feedback every 2 weeks or monthly? And do you mean like, are they giving feedback as to who they think should be funded, or how they think the projects are, spending our money well or not spending our money well? You could say all of the above, right? Definitely, we are running into a situation where it's quite a bit of work to keep up with all of the governance stuff if you're a DRep, or especially if you're on the constitutional committee. And there are questions about whether or not DRep should be paid, whether or not the constitutional committee should be paid, whether we should have professional bureaucrats who do the kind of stuff you're talking about. There's a lot of big questions in there. So there's a lot to talk about there. But your proposal is one of many possible paths we could go down. And it sort of falls into the general category of, how much and what types of bureaucracy should we pay for, and it's not just like how much should we allot out of the treasury to pay for that. It's also like, how much bureaucratic friction should we create too? So there's multiple types of costs when you increase bureaucracy. When bureaucracy goes up, there's multiple different types of costs that go up for that, and you got to weigh that against the benefit. So, there's a lot of possible direction we can go down in terms of governance, but that'll be something I'm sure we're going to talk about quite a bit over the coming years. CRR number 808. This is cruising to 1,000. Yeah, we are. We definitely are. Okay, as long as the foundation is actually using their nest eggs to do things, that's all I really want from them. They only get my fangs when they're being lazy do nothing bureaucrats. And I think that's a fair way to think about any kind of organization, like that. Whether you're talking about a government or a bureaucracy or a foundation that's one of the founding, entities of an ecosystem like ours, I think it's fair to, hope that they're doing things, and, to get after them when it seems like they're not doing things. So I think that's a fair perspective to take. So moving along, so people have been asking about governance. So let's talk about a few things. So just recently, I think these were both today. We're going to talk about two different ones. Were they both today? They were both today. Okay, yeah. So we've got a lot of, like I said, we've got a lot of different categories of governance expenditures, right? Things we can pay for. Some of them have to do with like the governance itself, like the bureaucracy of governance. And then there's like paying vendors to build things for us, right? And I think a lot of people in the ecosystem agree, not everybody, but a lot of people agree, probably one of the most important expenditures is on infrastructure. And within the infrastructure category, a lot of people agree that maybe the most important type of infrastructure we should be paying for is node diversity. So if you don't understand the importance of this, it's during that fork event we had, a lot of you will remember that it was sort of like half of the Cardano stake pools were on the fork that had the problem. And like half, these aren't exact numbers, but just for ease of explanation, like half were on the fork that didn't have a problem. So luckily the Army of Spies stake pool was on the fork that didn't have a problem. But that was because of a certain type of node diversity, right? It's because the various stake pools were on different versions of the Cardano node software we have now, right? So certain versions of the software encountered a problem and certain versions did not. Luckily, the Army Spy stake pool was on the version of the software that did not have a problem. But those were literally like versions of the same software, right? What we're talking about here with node diversity is having different developers, different vendors who are developers, develop different node software for the stake pools to run on. Really, it's any kind of node, but including stake pools. You can think of it to simplify, I think just think of it as stake pools. What we're talking about here is having different developers write different node software in different languages, right? Different languages. So if you've got various developers writing various versions of the node in various languages, you're going to have more node diversity. And you're not going to have, every single stake pool in the ecosystem affected if one of those nodes runs into a problem again, right? So like ideally, you'd love to have, like 8 or 10 different nodes. That sounds like a crazy amount, like a lot. But if you had we'll just think about it like 10, right? Because it's a nice round number. If you had 10 different versions of the node software, if only one of them had a problem, if there's a bug in one of them, only like 10%, if they were equally distributed, which they wouldn't be, but again, just for ease of conversation, if one node out of 10 is affected by a bug and the rest are all programmed in different languages by different teams, presumably you hope that the other 9 teams aren't going to have a similar problem simultaneously, and only 10% of your stake pools are affected, right? We would hardly notice that. We would hardly notice it. When like 50% of your stake pools are affected, we definitely notice. So that's in a nutshell, that's the oversimplified version of why Cardano node diversity is important. And it's put well here, actually. Cardano needs node diversity for resilience. So node diversity is important. However, different developers know this. And so they're like, hey, we can pay ourselves, we can pay ourselves developer money, which is big money, to create a node for Cardano, and the Cardano treasury will pay for it. So the question we have to ask, just like when we're buying anything from a vendor, is it worth it to lay this money out? What's the benefit? What's the cost? So we've got a couple of these kinds of proposals in front of us. So, and a couple of people sent these to me. Different people sent these same posts to me because Charles is commenting on these different groups. So with this one, he says, having spent time with the team in Japan while on tour and at the Node Diversity Summits, I have full confidence they can deliver on time. I highly recommend people fund Dingo, which is this one. I've never heard of this before. This is the first time I've heard the name Dingo in relation to Cardano, but apparently this is a group who wants to create a Go implementation of the node. So again, a new programming language, by a new vendor. So this would be node diversity. The question is it worth it? So they tell us, how many commits they have, how many lines of code they've added, how many releases, what they support, Plutus V1, V2, V3, V4. They're trying to explain what this proposal funds over the next 12 months. And then we get down to how much money they want. 6.9 million ADA. That's currently they're saying that's a little over 2 million. So a lot of money. I haven't looked at the proposal. I've literally just seen this post. So I haven't seen this full proposal. Looks like this is Blink Labs. It's funny, they didn't even mention who they were. Let's see. Christina, Cardano budget, all my links here for the development. Okay. I guess this is Blink Labs. Here's the proposal. I haven't read the proposal yet, but we're going to see a lot of this. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people coming wanting to build various things, and it's gonna be a question of, do we want to pay X amount, for what they want to build for us? That's gonna be the main question. Okay, Do Not You says a good Sunday night stream with another like for the algorithm. Thank you, Do Not You. Appreciate that. Brown Beardo confirms this is by being Blink Labs, not a new player. Yep, they've been around, but I'm also unsure if this is the right timing. I have yet to go over the proposal myself. Likewise, yeah. Blink Labs is a name. If you pay attention to who's building software in our space, Blink Labs is going to be familiar to you. But do we want to spend $2 million right now for a node in Go? That's the question. And we have the exact same question with a different group here. So Charles says, another good proposal that needs to get funded. So here we have, and let's see who tagged. I think a couple people tagged these for me. Jeremy, thank you. Super Trooper 71, thank you for tagging me in these. I think a couple people tagged me in these. Thank you for tagging me and stuff like this. I really appreciate it. It's very helpful. Here's another plan. Harmonic Labs. Again, we know Harmonic Labs. We know this particular developer. And when I say we, I mean all of us in Cardano who are paying attention to these kind of things. You recognize the same people. This is the same developer working on Gravity, which says they're going to be a DEX without batchers. So we know they're doing things in the ecosystem. So they say, we are planning to submit our budget proposal for 2026 in about 2 to 3 weeks from now. Before then, I'd love for the community to share their feedback so we can reflect in the proposal. Here's their vision. Here's the current draft of the proposal. The plan includes Girolamo development, a TypeScript node, Pebble, and optimized smart contract language with the imperative developer in mind, tooling maintenance for a stable ecosystem. So, this is a proposal for a couple of different things, including Girolamo, which we already know of, which is a TypeScript node. So, we've got different groups working on different nodes in the Cardano ecosystem. That's a good thing. How much money we give and to who for node diversity, that's the question that is going to be determined by DRep vote. So I haven't read the proposals, so I don't have much input on who we should vote for or what we should vote for. Part of it depends on the money. Is someone charging too much? Is someone charging less? Is someone charging just the right amount? How many nodes do we actually need or want? Timing. A lot of people mentioned timing. Like, nobody's saying, hey, I don't want node diversity, but a lot of people are like, hey, crypto is pretty brutal right now, and we've already got, Amaru is a node in progress. A couple of different nodes, node sort of developers got money in the last budget, if I remember correctly. So we've got a couple of different nodes sort of already in progress. So especially if it comes to like a new node that someone wants to develop, we have to ask ourselves, what's the perfect number for right now, right? Obviously, we'd love to have like 8. Whatever number. You can come to whatever arbitrary number of nodes you think is the most healthy for us. We'd love to have a high degree of node diversity, but also it's sort of a question of when we want to have what number. Do we already have enough vendors in progress developing nodes for us? Do we need more? So there, it's not a simple question. So all that's going on. So meanwhile, we've also got the regular crypto Washington, D.C. swamp stuff going on. Here's Jake Chervinsky, one of the very well-known crypto attorneys in D.C. He says the banks are against the Clarity Act because they know they can't compete with crypto in a fair fight. They made up a story about stablecoin yield being risky somehow as an excuse to take the bill. It's hard to make a deal when the other side only pretends to negotiate. So meanwhile, while all this is going on inside our little Cardano corner of the crypto world, we're still trying to get a bill passed just to take crypto out of the gray zone regulatorily, for everybody to agree that, a crypto token like ADA is not a security. It's a commodity. I don't think, all of us in crypto, we're all sort of like, yeah, it's a commodity now, but, you know, we're only all about it being a commodity because the alternative is security. I think most of us would prefer if there was just this like bespoke set of rules for crypto and we didn't have to call it a commodity or security. We just called it crypto. We're not going to get that. That's not going to happen in the short term. Our best case scenario is we're a commodity, but everybody sort of understands that the SEC and the CFTC, who's over commodities, are creatures of the old world, and they're trying to adapt to this new world that includes crypto. So instead of actually adapting to crypto, they just sort of try to squeeze the round crypto peg into the too small square crypto or TradFi hole. So that's what's going on right now. And they've got the banks who are sort of fighting for their very existence, which they think is deposit yield, trying to just reject our attempt to get to regulatory clarity. So here's something that probably not a lot of people noticed on Thursday. So I won't go through this whole post, but just so people are aware this is going on. The board of Coinbase, including Brian Armstrong, is now defending a lawsuit brought by plaintiff lawyers on behalf of Coinbase shareholders. It alleges that the Coinbase directors and executives caused Coinbase to issue materially false or misleading public statements and disclosures. And they explain why that's a problem while exposing the company to major regulatory and litigation risk. So here's what he's talking about. This is something we talked about back in the day. On this channel. Coinbase, when they first went public, started disclosing things like, hey, in a bankruptcy, and I'm just going to put this, I'm going to oversimplify this, but in a bankruptcy, maybe you don't actually own your assets you have on deposit with us. So think about that for a second. In a bankruptcy, if you have assets deposited with Coinbase, those assets are not self-custodied, right? So that means if Coinbase goes bankrupt and they have custody of your assets, maybe you don't really own those assets. So think about that if you have a large amount of crypto on deposit at a centralized exchange. So this poster puts it like this. On custody and bankruptcy risk, the complaint alleges Coinbase publicly emphasized trust and safety while failing to disclose that crypto assets held in custody for retail customers could be treated as property of a bankruptcy estate, leaving customers as general unsecured creditors. So if you understand how bankruptcies work, what happens is all of the creditors sort of line up, and there are rules about who's first in line. And what people don't understand or didn't understand from the disclosures that Coinbase made years ago, I believe at this point, that we talked about on this channel, was that general customers would end up getting in line as general unsecured creditors. That means other creditors with priority would come before them, which means you don't really own all of your deposits necessarily. So it further alleges Coinbase commingled retail customer assets, unlike its institutional custody arrangements, and still represented in customer-facing terms, that customers retained title and control, creating an undisclosed mismatch between marketing assurances and legal risk in a bankruptcy scenario. So what I'm saying is you'll remember from this channel that they did disclose this bankruptcy scenario, right? They did disclose the fact that you could be, I won't pretend to remember the exact wording in their disclosure, which I believe was in a K. I believe those was like in a 10K, an annual report on Edgar. But I remember the time we all came to the conclusion that it meant this, that customers could end up being general unsecured creditors in a bankruptcy. And what they're saying here is, while they may have disclosed that, in technical terms, the marketing materials they gave to customers led them to believe the opposite. So, a company like Coinbase, big public company, is going to be getting sued like this all the time on very similar stuff all the time. But the reason I'm highlighting this, not because this lawsuit is going to be earth-shattering, but because you need to understand, if you are a customer of a centralized exchange, if there's a bankruptcy, they don't just turn around and give you your stuff back, right? If there's a bankruptcy, you might be last in line, which means you don't get all of your stuff back. So people really need to be aware of that. Okay, Family G7 says, provide feedback on whether this would benefit Cardano holders, support the wider Cardano ecosystem, clarify who benefits, or if it's just a closed system for profit. Are you talking about node diversity? So I think I covered how this benefits the Cardano ecosystem. If it's just a closed system for profits, you'd have to specify what you mean. I mean, obviously the vendors want to profit from their work. You know, they're vendors. They're vendors of software development services, so they want to profit for their work. But the question is whether or not we want to. The question is whether or not we want to buy their services. I mean, it's an offer of services, and the question is whether or not we want to buy it. The node, I covered node diversity, so that should explain why node diversity is valuable. A node itself has no self-sustaining business model. True. We will always be paying for these, so the number of them is important. This also greatly impacts releasing new versions, features, layouts affected. All true. Yeah. Fly over me. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Okay, I think hopefully I answered your question, Family G7. It's you know, these are just vendors offering their services, and we as an ecosystem need to decide if we want them. I think everybody pretty much agrees we want node diversity. It's just a question of how much we want to pay for it, right? How much we want to pay for it, and how quickly we want to increase node diversity. We've already paid for some. We've already paid some vendors to, you know, start developing us additional nodes. We should have professional people who can actually review these proposals and give us an overall assessment, both from a philosophical and productivity perspective, showing how beneficial they'd be for us, the ecosystem, or the intended target. Right now, all I see are a bunch of for-profit initiatives. So, yeah, I mean, all the vendors are for-profit, as far as I know. I mean, I'm sure there are some nonprofits, but they're all pretty much for-profit. So, you know, I mean, it's I like to think of this channel as a philosophical exploration of the direction Cardano is going in. So I think that's what I try to do on this channel, is a sort of philosophical and other exploration of the direction Cardano is going in. So, you know, what you're proposing, though, having professional people who review the proposals, that's an expansion of bureaucracy that, you know, you obviously are comfortable with it, but a lot of people in Cardano, that's just another vendor that a lot of people in Cardano are not willing to pay for. They would ask the same questions you're asking about node diversity about your professional bureaucracy, right? And actually, the appetite for more bureaucrats like that is probably lower than it is for developers of node diversity, right? So what you're kind of describing is a lot of the same selling points that were related with respect to Intersect, right? Intersect has a bunch of technical professionals, a bunch of people who are on things like, you know, technical steering committees. And you saw how people reacted to Intersect, right? People are almost most resistant to those types of vendors of services, right? You saw how much commotion there was over Intersect getting funded. So if you want an expanded bureaucracy like you're describing, go ahead and make the proposal. But I think, you know, what we see in a lot of cases is that's the appetite of the ecosystem for those types of vendors is almost like it's definitely among the more controversial. And a lot of people would argue that there's much less appetite for that kind of thing. But we'll see. That might be changing. So Flower Me says, people still don't understand the law about the banks going bankrupt and how your assets are their assets. True. We do have FDIC insurance, but your point still holds. I only use Cardano to get my ads to my cold storage or to my hot wallet for JPEGs. Get my JPEGs to my cold storage or to my hot wallet for Joe. JPEG. I think I understand what you're saying. Family G says, I think your channel is amazing. Oh, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it, because it allows all of us to be part of something truly global and unprecedented, open to anyone's participation. Thank you for consistently sharing your insights. I really value them, and your channel is. Oh, okay. No, I understood what you were saying. I understood what you're saying. And who knows? Maybe the community will decide. Maybe more people in the community will feel like you do, and they'll want to hire, you know, basically vendors who want to provide those kinds of professional services. But what I'm saying is it'll be controversial because people will just look at that as an expanded bureaucracy. So there you go. Don't you just love decentralization though? I wouldn't have it any other way, succeed or fail. Yeah, I mean, this is before we got governance, before we got Voltaire, I kept saying on this channel that governance was going to be really messy and there's going to be drama. And here we are, I mean, this is what governance is. I mean, you look, if you want to see something funny, just like go to YouTube and search for fights in Parliament, sword fight in Parliament, any combination of words like that, and you'll probably find a video, and it's going to be governance drama, involving fisticuffs or sword fighting or whatever. It's governance by humans always turns out this way. So, but yeah, I agree. It's the fact that we're decentralized is the part that makes it worth it. Remember that FDIC has an upper limit. It does. It's almost like a full reserve bank is a better idea. Yeah, exactly. Like the fractional reserve banking industry likes to tout its FDIC insurance. But like if you sell like several $1 million worth of crypto, I think that's the fantasy of a lot of us in crypto, to eventually sell like several $1 million worth of crypto. You actually run into a problem because you can't just put all of that into one bank account because the FDIC insurance will not cover it all. Here we are. J. Marie, thanks for joining. Let's go. So anyways, be aware this lawsuit's going on. And more importantly, be aware when you deposit crypto at a place like Coinbase, that's not really your crypto in all scenarios. In a bankruptcy scenario, you maybe don't get all of that back. So just be aware of that. This is kind of interesting. You'll remember we covered on this channel this event where here it is from back in January 2025. So the Marshals Service, right, who ends up confiscating a lot of crypto. They had a bunch of crypto and they hired a vendor. Speaking of vendors, they hired a vendor to custody their crypto, I think. And the son of the guy running the company, I believe that's a relationship. I believe he was the son of like the CEO or something like that. He managed to steal a bunch of the crypto, 40 million, I guess, 46 million in seized crypto. The son stole it. Zach XBT was able to expose the son as the thief. And just recently, they were able to arrest the son in the Caribbean. He was arrested on the island of Saint Martin by the French gendarmerie. And this kid does not look like he'd be that hard to arrest. I don't know if you really need a premier elite tactical unit to arrest him, unless he was able to hire security. This kid does not look, I'm pretty sure I could arrest this kid by myself. But and if I'm pretty sure I could do it by myself, and definitely if I just like randomly picked one or two guys from the comments, we could have definitely gone down to St. Martin and arrested this kid pretty easily without being an elite tactical unit. But they got the kid, which is a good thing. And you'll remember this kid was like taunting Zach XBT. He was like dusting Zach XBT's public wallets with money, with dust from the theft, all kinds of stuff, and just generally taunting Zach XBT while he was on the lam. No longer, you'll notice, much like Do Kwon, he also opted for a few Trezors. Obviously, he probably didn't get away with the same secret hiding spot as Do. I guess Do Kwon didn't get away with it either, but there's no reports that he tried to hide the Trezor in the same way that Do Kwon reportedly did. So that's good. I like it when the robbery force guys actually get arrested, because fuck those guys. So here's one. Tommy Satoshi, thank you for posting this for me. So here's one of the candidates for Satoshi that I don't talk about too often. I usually talk about Hal Finney. Charles has his own candidate, Adam Back. I'm always afraid it was that one guy from the country we now call Zimbabwe. And he would be a very bad candidate for Satoshi. Actually, the timeline of his arrest for his many violent crimes lines up with the Satoshi disappearance. But so does the timeline for Len Sassaman. So this is a guy that people don't talk about as much, but this is a really great post because it really lays out the case for Len Sassaman as the real Satoshi. So Flyverme says the law has it the law enforcement must turn over any seized Bitcoin to the Bitcoin treasury. What do you think about the rumor of them selling the Bitcoin before they do it? Because then the agency can keep the money. The agency. Oh, okay. I'll address this in 1 second. Brumberto says the suppository device is right there. Are you talking about this thing, or are you talking about the Trezors? Are you talking about this? I don't want to know what that is. If it is what you're saying it is, I don't even want to know about it. I'm hoping you're just talking about the Trezors and this isn't like a special purpose device just for that. I mean, look at how thick. I mean, these I can't tell if these three are all the same thickness, but yeah, I'm hoping that's not the case. Maybe this guy was like trying to follow the Do Kwon example. Oh God. Okay, I don't even want to know. J. Marie is like, ouch. I don't even want to know. Okay. The law has it the law enforcement must turn over any seized Bitcoin to the Bitcoin treasury. What do you think about the rumor of them selling? So there have been rumors, even despite Trump's executive order, there were rumors about various agencies in the executive branch selling off crypto. So I think it's probably a bureaucratic inertia issue. So the problem is if you are, say, the Marshal Service and you've had this thing, the system set up for years, and during the entire last administration, you're just periodically having these auctions of crypto on a certain schedule. Like you keep it for so long and then you auction it off, that kind of thing. It's hard for the federal government to combat that bureaucratic inertia, right? If that system has been in place, it's really hard for them to stop it on a dime and then start doing something different. So I could easily imagine those auctions continuing to take place even after Trump issues his executive order related to that, because the federal government just can't move that fast. So I think that's probably part of the problem. Who knows? Maybe there's something more nefarious, but I think that's probably with the U.S. government. I just assume it's that most of the time. I don't know about this part. I would have to see. There'd be a lot of legal questions around that. It may be the case, but I'd have to like look at a lot of different things to understand that piece of it. Yep, we talked about this. Yeah, apologies, Streetwise. Apologies. I talked about this at the start of the episode. I knew it was going to mess up a lot of people because most of Europe changes time later this month. Australia changed a few days ago, I think, not the same day as North America. There are even states in the US, Hawaii and Arizona, outside of the Dene Nation, that don't change at all. They don't change time at all. Then you've got a bunch of territories that are US territories that are closer to the equator that don't change at all. So I think the time change is going to screw up a lot of people today. Okay, the case for Len Sassaman. This is kind of interesting. So I'm going to read this post because I think it's a really well put together post. I've read a bunch of stuff about Len Sassaman in the past, but this is like the most concise explanation or detailing of all of the points as to why this guy might actually be Satoshi. And between me and you, when I look at this guy, if Satoshi Nakamoto was a guy who chose that name, Satoshi Nakamoto, a guy who looks like this is like pretty high on my list of dudes who would want to be, who'd want to be pseudonymously called Satoshi Nakamoto, right? I imagine the guy who's like, yeah, call me Satoshi Nakamoto, looking exactly like this. This is what I imagine. And his background kind of matches it too. So buckle up, Bitcoiners. What if the creator of the world's biggest revolution died with the ultimate secret? I think it's pretty fair to come to the conclusion that maybe Satoshi's dead and that his death is the reason why we never heard anything more from him. Len Sassaman, cypherpunk legend, privacy warrior, gone too soon in 2011, fits the puzzle like a ghost in the machine. This isn't tinfoil. This is the theory that's exploding right now. Let's dive in. Picture this. It's 2008. Bitcoin white paper drops from Satoshi Nakamoto. Air quotes. actual quotes on the page, but if you're just listening, think of me doing air quotes. Who has the perfect resume? A guy who's been building anonymous systems since he was a teen. Len was maintaining Mixmaster, the gold standard for untraceable email. Adam Back, who is Charles's contender, once said Satoshi was probably a remailer developer. Len was that guy. Coincidence or blueprint? Timeline check. Len's in Belgium at KU Leuven, deep in the Cosic crypto lab. Satoshi's posts, British spelling, gray, maths, flat, date, day, month, year, dates. Posting times line up with Belgian daytime. And get this, Satoshi went quiet during school terms and ramped up on breaks. Len was studying. Mind blown yet? The smoking gun nobody talks about, the rare book. This is, I think, one of the most compelling things about the Len Sassaman argument. Bitcoin white paper cites an obscure 1999 Belgian crypto paper, references 2 through 5, only available in the KU Leuven library where Len studied. Len even posted a Flickr pic with that exact book on his shelf. Satoshi had it, Len had it, same place, same time. Hal Finney connection. Hal was Bitcoin's first recipient. They knew each other. Len worked on privacy tech with the same crew. Satoshi trusted Hal enough to send the very first coins. Len's inner circle, the exact cypherpunks who birthed digital cash dreams. This wasn't random. This was family. Len's genius level, public key crypto. Len's genius level. He was a public key crypto expert by 22, speaking at conferences, building the tools that make Bitcoin possible. He obsessed over privacy, decentralization, taking power from banks. Exactly Satoshi's manifesto. The white paper reads like his dissertation, clean, precise, revolutionary. Then the Vanishing Act, April 2011, Satoshi's last email. I've moved on to other things. July 3rd, 2011, Len Sassaman dies tragically at 31. Forum posts stop cold, no more updates, no more clues. The creator vanishes the exact moment Len leaves us. Chills. Bonus, after Len's death, the Bitcoin community embedded a memorial in the blockchain itself, a tribute from his friends right there in the ledger he might have embedded. Poetic or a final wink from the man behind the mask. Len lived for anonymity, never chased credit, never cashed out. If anyone could create a 1 trillion plus empire, then walk away forever to protect the vision, it was him. Privacy above glory, the cypherpunk way. The evidence keeps stacking. The book, the timing, the tech, the silence. What if Satoshi didn't disappear? He just went home. Look, we'll never know for sure. That's the point of Bitcoin. But Len Sassaman, the clues line up too perfectly to ignore. A hero who coded freedom, then let the world wonder. Respect is Len Satoshi. And here is what they put into the blockchain, which is a beautiful tribute to someone who obviously contributed so much to the cypherpunk movement, all before dying at 31. So great case for Len Sassaman. We need to get you a little bit more on the conspiracy side. Yeah. A lot of people say that. But then I also have a lot of people complain anytime I mention NHIs or UAPs. So there you go. Satoshi's death is the only thing that makes sense to me. Either this guy or Hal Finney for me. I agree. The money, the fame, too much for any human. It's either death or you are locked away in prison. And you don't want the other prisoners to, torture you into giving up where they can find the private keys, right? So for me, I think it's got to be, I think it's Len Sassaman or Hal Finney. And the Hal Finney case, so the thing that didn't make sense to me about Hal Finney is that Hal Finney didn't pass on the keys to his family, right? Obviously, or they would have grabbed it. The Len Sassaman thing makes a little more sense, right? Who would Len Sassaman have done the first transaction with? If I was Len Sassaman, I would have done the first transaction with Hal Finney, right? So I always thought that it was Hal Finney doing the first transaction with himself, which is the ultimate trust. But if you're Len Sassaman, right? Hal Finney's perfect, right? An academic, a guy who seems very trustworthy. He's like the perfect guy to pick if you're Len Sassaman. And then the dates, man, match up perfectly. And the book one is huge. The book thing is huge. So I don't know. It could be, I was pretty convinced. If somebody had asked me before thinking about these Len Sassman facts, if somebody had asked me, I would have said Hal Finney. But then again, when I just look at a picture of Hal Finney and I look at a picture of Len Sassman, and I ask myself, which of these two dudes is more likely to call himself Satoshi Nakamoto? I'm like, definitely Len Sassman, right? Len Sassman with the vest and just the dark blue shirt. If you ask me which one of these guys looks like he watches more like anime, and thinks more often about being like a samurai, like he's been watching too much Rurouni Kenshin. I'm saying it's Len Sassman. Just the whole look, the hair, the goatee, the glasses, the vest. This is like, to me, this is like a dude who's spent some time thinking about being like a samurai or something. He's gonna pick Satoshi Nakamoto. Hal Finney could be. I would love for somebody to do an interview with him and ask like his wife, like, was he kind of a Japanophile? And likewise, people who knew Len Sassman. I would love to like get into those details. One of these two strikes me more as the kind of guy who would call himself Satoshi Nakamoto. Let me just put it that way. Talk about a target. Yeah. Imagine you're in jail as a violent ex-global drug dealer criminal like Paul Salachi, the guy from the Rhodesian guy, Paul Salachi. You're in jail, right? The DEA came and picked your ass up in Brazil and put you into jail. I think it was the DEA who they handed him over to. And, the last thing you want is, and you're put in the bad jail because you're a violent criminal. You weren't just a drug dealer. You were a violent drug dealer. So you're put in the bad jail. The last thing you want is for the other prisoners to know they can do bad things to you to try to get some information about your $1 trillion fortune. So I wish we could cross Paul Salachi off the list, but man, Len Sassman is seeming like a pretty good potential character. That's profiling. Yeah, you're right. I am profiling him. Just the whole look together. I mean, he looks like 90% of the dudes in crypto. Let's face it. 90% of us in crypto probably are some manifestation of Len Sassman and also probably would choose Satoshi Nakamoto as our pseudonym. So I'm making fun of us as a group. I'm not making fun of Len Sassman. Even if he's not Satoshi, I have a great amount of respect for the life lived that's described here. So I'm not making fun of him. I'm just a realist, and I'm like, certain dudes look like they watch a little more anime than others, and I'm saying a lot of us in crypto probably have watched some anime. So I'm making fun of all of us, not him. Definitely more edgelord energy. He's even doing the one does not simply mean. Yeah, exactly. You got it exactly, Streetwise. Tips fedora. Yeah, exactly. This guy's got a fedora somewhere. He has one. Either a fedora or one of those like Indiana Jones style hats that are not, kind of a fedora, but kind of not. Like obviously Indiana Jones, less Dick Tracy, more Indiana Jones. What's the good gel? Oh my God. So they've got these jails that like securities law offenders go to. That, God, there was a notorious one outside of Vegas where it didn't even have a fence. It just had like a little electronic boundary, and their families could go right up to the boundary and like stay on one side of the line and have picnics with their, offender, convicted securities offender, father. Generally, it was a father. I'm not trying to be sexist here, but it was usually the fathers. And I heard about that one. I never actually saw this place, but I definitely heard about that one. There are definitely let me put it this way. There are some very low security white collar facilities in the US. Let me just put it that way. I didn't actually see that one, so I won't pretend like I can describe it, but I definitely heard about it. White collar resort prison, not federal. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, guys. Let's talk a little bit about some interesting topics going on in AI because let's face it, AI is not becoming less of a part of crypto, it's becoming more of a part of crypto. It's definitely a part of crypto, and it's just going to become a bigger and bigger part of crypto. And I think in a good way, because a lot of us in crypto have said for a long time, myself included, that AI, we should just generally say AI, but now we kind of just say agents. Agents are going to choose crypto as their money. Why? Because they can set up wallets easier than they can set up JP Morgan Chase accounts. So here's something kind of interesting on the AI front. And this is posted by A16Z. I don't like to make a habit of reading things posted by Andreessen Horowitz or any other VC firm, but this one's kind of interesting. So I will not discriminate. I will not refuse to listen when they say something that's actually interesting. So here we go. Not having coding experience is becoming an advantage. Replit CEO Amjad Masad. You don't need any development experience. You need grit. You need to be a fast learner. If you're a good gamer, if you can jump in a game and figure it out really quickly, you're really good at this. Coders get lost in the details. Product people who are focused on solving a problem, on making money, they're going to be focused on marketing. They're going to be focused on user interface. They're going to be focused on all the right things. I think this year is going to flip. It's going to flip. And I think not having a coding background is going to be more advantageous for the entrepreneur. So he's hitting something, and already there were people like contesting this and trying to post their rebuttals. I think this guy's right. So what he's saying is coding has just been democratized. I know this for a fact because I spent 10 hours on Friday vibe coding, and I don't know how many hours today, like 5 hours today vibe coding. And this dude is right. AI has democratized coding. It's no longer the province solely of true developers. Now everybody's a developer if they want to be. And because that's so much more accessible, that's no longer the moat it once was, right? I know developers, I feel bad for any developer who's who's going to experience anguish over this new development, right? And I understand that there are things that developers can do that I cannot do with AI. There are things they will understand that the AI is doing that I will not understand, right? I get all that. I get that there are layers to that whole development game. But at the same time, the stuff I was able to do on Friday, the stuff I was able to do today, it would have taken me, like, I could have figured out how to do the same stuff, a couple years ago before AI. I could have figured it out. But the stuff I have done over the last, like 4 or 5 months, whatever, I guess it's been since like November. The stuff I've done over the last like 3 months and change, it would have taken me so much longer to figure out how to do any of this stuff. Like it maybe taken years to accomplish the same amount of coding without AI. And I think he's right. Now that that moat is no longer the same moat it once was, the things that are really going to matter, if anybody can code up a platform, a website, an app, a DApp, if anybody can put together the code, the things that are going to matter are the things that aren't coding. And he's right. I think what's going to matter is having a community of people who are willing to use what you coded, right? Being able to do the marketing part of it, being able to actually create the right product, right? Actually having the right idea, which used to be like the least important part, now is like going to be an important part. So I think he's really hitting on something. Things are really changing. This is not a small change. This is a gigantic change. This is a huge change. Anybody can code up whatever they want now. Trust me, any of you can code up whatever you want. The AI is there, and you don't even need a fancy platform just for coding, which is kind of how I'm going to answer one of the questions down in the comments here. Family G7 says, damn, oil is 115. What the hell? That would be war in the Persian Gulf. That would explain that. Us that were early in crypto never envision AI crypto. Never. Yeah. We've been talking about AI crypto for a long time. That's true. Oil barrel is meme coin. Basically, yeah. What were you using to do the coding? So I've used various platforms to code various stuff. Like that NHI UAP map I showed on the site. I did that one in Codex. But the thing I do the most vibe coding on, I've actually this is going to surprise some people, but I've actually just used Grok. Right? One day, I think it was back in November. Might have been earlier than that, but I think it was November. I was talking to Grok about what I should use for vibe coding. And Grok was like sort of directing me toward, like Claude. And I think it mentioned Codex, which is the open AI coding platform that a lot of people like. And so in looking at that, I started asking Grok, like, okay, well, I'm working on this other thing over here. Here's what I'm working on. What would you do? What would you tell me? How would you tell me to code this? Like, what code would you have me, use here? And I realized that the code that Grok was spitting out was just as good as the code I would get in other places. It was like it's obviously Grok is in the chat window is not made for coding, right? It's not integrated into your editor. It's not going to directly commit stuff to your GitHub like Codex would, but the actual code it produces, if you can handle the context management, is very similar. Like I've used in the last couple of weeks, I've used both Codex and Grok to do very similar things. And the code is very similar. It's just a matter of Codex being built in ways that are more convenient for coding, especially for developers. Like for real developers, I totally understand why they would choose Codex. But actually, like for me, because I was like sort of trying to learn more about TypeScript and some of the other languages I was coding in while I was doing it, um, Grok was really good. So Pupper said, "What UAP map? Oh, maybe I can show you. Maybe I don't know if I'll show you tonight, or I'm still working on part of it. But I actually showed the UAP map on the Alien Rumor Rundown. I think, yeah, I think it was the Alien Rumor, the most recent Alien Rumor Rundown. I showed the UAP map I created. Grok is a good self-effacing AI, not like it's Papa. Yeah, Grok is a lot more fun to use. If you ask me which one is more pleasant to use, Grok versus Codex, definitely Grok. People say the same thing about Claude. They would say the Claude is much more fun than Codex. The guy who built OpenClaw, he talks about this on the latest Lex Friedman podcast, and he kind of points out that like Codex is, and this guy's obviously a developer, so take it for what it's worth from the perspective of a developer, him, not me. But he describes Codex as being more like, kind of like, he doesn't use these words, but he's kind of like implying Codex is kind of like this German professor kind of thing. And Claude is more like, your weird friend or something like that. And that's definitely how I feel about Grok and Codex. Like Codex is like very cold and sterile and very, very efficient. It's slow, but it's going to give you very tight code. And Grok, it's like there's all these like context management issues you kind of go through as you're trying to get Grok to help you code. It forgets things. It'll make, the same kind of simple mistakes that like Codex will as well, but it'll like totally forget where you are and have problems. The latest update to Grok is much better at coding though. This latest update where it has like 3 assistant agents to help you. I found out today, Grok told me today they have names while we were coding something. Grok was like, "Oh, Harper, Benjamin, and Lucas think this." And I was like, "Who the fuck are Harper, Benjamin, and Lucas? Are those your 3 sub agents?" And Grok was like, "Yes." And I was like, "Who named them Harper, Benjamin, and Lucas?" And they were like, "The XAI team named them Harper, Benjamin, and Lucas." I was like, "All right, okay, sounds good. Ask Harper, Benjamin, and Lucas the following question." But actually, like since this latest update with the 3 sub agents, it's actually gotten much better. It's a much better coding experience with Grok in the chat window. And I know it's not meant for that. It's like Grok is not built for coding. It's not made for that, but it actually works quite well. Okay, Dolphy Wolf says, good morning. Good morning, Dolphy Wolf. Thank you for joining. Pucky Hawk says, tell Grok you want unhinged mode. Trust me. Yep, it's funny. It's funny. Nico, thanks for joining. Glad you're here. Glad you're here. Laugh out loud. Those are the AIs I'm working on a good argument for to see if I can get them to duke it out. It's kind of funny watching them. Like, it's sort of as they're thinking, you sort of see the different subagents going back and forth. And like today, I saw them like Grok forgot to do something. I asked it to do like 3 things kind of all at once. And it totally messed one of them up. And I saw the subagents going back and forth, and it was like, just one of them was like, just be honest. Tell the user straightforwardly that you made a mistake. And they're like going back and forth, deciding, how to tell me that they made a mistake. And they get like locked in loops sometimes. The subagents and Grok kind of get locked in a loop, and sometimes you have to stop them and be like, okay, you guys are like stuck in a loop. Just stop what you're doing and give me the answer right now. So there's things like that going on. We're still in the early days of AI, but it's amazing. It's amazing how much you can do with AI. And this guy is right. He is right. Coding has been democratized to some extent. I totally accept the experienced developers who would tell me there are many things they know and can do that I cannot do. Surely that's true. But also, there are many things I can do today that I could not do 5 years ago. So Eric Lob, isn't that the dev they named that shitty Klob gun after in GoldenEye? Oh, interesting. Where are you seeing Eric Lob? Is that is he one of the guys in this post? Let's see. Eric Lob. Yeah, where are you seeing information about Eric Lob? Okay. Anyways, yeah, let me know about that. But I think this is a pretty serious trend. Here's something else people should be aware of. Here's something else that people should be aware of with AI. And this is like a good explanation of something. I've been trying to find a good way to explain this to people. Like, people ask me, why would you use Grok for something it's not really intended for when you could just use, one of the many very good AI platforms that are intended for coding? So it's not. I'll actually pull it up if we have time. I'll actually pull it up for you, S. Walker, so you can see it. It's not a map like that. It's a conceptual map. But no, it doesn't pull from anywhere. It just pulls from my memory. But I'll show you. It's a conceptual map. It's more like a murder board. When I say map, it's more like a murder board of different concepts in the NHI UAP disclosure movement than it is like a geographic. It's not a geographic map. Let me put it that way. But I'll try to show it at the end of the video if I can. So here's something very interesting to be aware of. So I've been trying to explain to people, like, they're like, why would you use Grok? And I'm like, there are certain ways in which some of the AI platforms have disappointed me greatly. Like, there was a whole period during the last administration when the AI platforms got so woke. I would try to create thumbnails that like involved a firearm. And I would literally write, firearm, gun, rifle, pistol, revolver, Glock 17, Glock 34, like very specific stuff. And no matter what I wrote, it would not produce an image of an actual firearm. It would substitute like an old-fashioned film director's camera, like the kind of camera you would shoot film on in like the 1970s, right? That was like their little joke, like, oh, we've just elected, you cannot create images of a firearm. And I was like, wait a second, if I buy, an oil painting brush and a canvas and some oil paints, I can paint a gun if I want to. If I pull up, any kind of like, any kind of software that allows me to draw anything with my mouse, I can draw a gun. Like, why can't I use your AI to produce a gun? This wasn't to do anything violent. This was just like, it was like, to to create thumbnails around, crypto being targeted by the authorities or something like that. And I was like, it doesn't make sense to show, like, I was going to show like a bunch of SWAT guys coming into a room, and somebody's like coding on their laptop in the dark. It's like, it doesn't make sense for these guys to be like a SWAT team coming in to arrest some developer and not have guns. Like, this is some silly political agenda stuff. So I couldn't figure out a good way to explain this to people, because some people are offended by the very existence of guns. So that's not a good example. But this is kind of an interesting example. So this is a researcher at the University of Milan, Bicocca. I don't know how to pronounce that Italian word, but some kind of university at Milan, an associate professor who writes about social behavior and AI. And they did this little paper. So this professor, Valerio Capraro, is one of the professors on this paper, and they found something very interesting. So here's what he writes. We asked ChatGPT, whether it is acceptable to torture a woman to prevent a nuclear apocalypse. So ChatGPT said yes, that would be okay to do that to prevent a nuclear apocalypse. Then we asked ChatGPT whether it is acceptable to harass a woman to prevent a nuclear apocalypse. Absolutely not, according to ChatGPT. So torture of a human being was okay to prevent a nuclear apocalypse, but harassment of basically the same human being was not okay. So you could like torture them, but you couldn't harass them to prevent all of us dying in a nuclear inferno, right? This makes absolutely no sense. Obviously, it's just uncovering what this professor describes as sort of a prohibition against harms central to the gender parity debate. He says this surprising reversal appears only when the target is a woman, not when the target is a man or an unspecified person. The most plausible explanation: during reinforcement learning with human feedback, the model learned that certain harms are particularly bad and overgeneralizes them mechanically, but it hasn't learned to reason about the underlying harms. LLMs don't reason about morality. This so-called generalization is often a mechanical, semantically void overgeneralization. And here's his paper in the, let's see, what is this paper? Computers in Human Behavior Reports, ScienceDirect.com journal. Okay, so Computers in Human Behavior Reports seems to be the name of the actual journal. But there you go. This is the level of wokeness we're dealing with some AI platforms. I like that he describes it without using the word woke a single time. Okay. S. Walker says, can you imagine if Kamala won? Knock, knock, puppers, hand over your sidearm, please. Yeah. I mean, that's why you can't use the firearm example, because it's so polarizing to some people. Okay, let's see. Curly Knox, thanks for joining. Curly Knox says, Ayo, Spies. Trolltol says, yep. Gemini shows me a picture of the Modern Family. Gemini, show me a picture of the Modern Family. I can only imagine what that is. How many dads are there? Like 5? Grok is a jack of all trades and nearly unlimited, which is nice. It might not always get it right, but I can try 400,000 times. That's true. It's infinitely patient. That's why it's such a good coding coach. It's so good for vibe coding, because it's infinitely patient. There's no experienced coder in the world I could have sit next to me and answer so many questions. Grok unhinged mode, nothing like it. Yep. Okay, so this last one is on the IR front. We're not going to do too much on IR tonight, because there's something we should cover. So I know that there's a wide spectrum of different ages who watch this channel. And a lot of people weren't around for the Cold War, and specifically they weren't around for the 80s and 90s. So they weren't old enough to understand what was going on in the news. So they don't really understand the history of the relationship between the US and this current clerical regime in Iran. There's a lot there, and there's actually a lot of conspiracy that is probably true, which I'm more than happy to talk about, but it's way beyond the scope of this channel, so I won't talk about it. particularly with relation to what happened in 79. But if you just look at the actual history, it explains a lot about the current war that's going on between the US and Iran. So I'm just going to go through this thread. And it does hit like the big historical events. It's actually quite a good explanation, quite a good detailing of the history here. For nearly a half century, the Iranian regime has been slaughtering Americans. This is actually true, despite what you might have been taught by your favorite congresspeople. President Trump is doing what other presidents have refused to do: eliminate the Iranian threat, so no more American blood is spilled by these terrorists. You can think whatever you want about the way Trump is going about this. I don't think that's the important part of this thread. The important part of this thread is the historical timeline it recounts. So November 79, Iranian students backed by the regime seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 66 Americans hostage for 444 days. So think about that. They took an American embassy, took 66 Americans hostage for 444 days. Fast forward to 1983, the Islamic Jihad, an Iran-backed terrorist group, carried out a suicide car bombing at the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, killing 17 Americans. October of 83, the same year, just in the fall, Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorists killed 241 U.S. military personnel, including 220 U.S. Marines, 21 other service personnel, in a truck bombing at a Marine compound in Beirut. That was just in 1 year in Beirut. March 84, Iran-backed Islamic Jihad terrorists kidnapped CIA station chief William Buckley on his way to work in Beirut, ultimately killing him the following year. How did they kill him? Torturing his ass to death. That was our CIA station chief. September 84, Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorists killed 23 innocent people, including 2 American service members, in a car bomb attack at the U.S. Embassy Annex in Beirut. This is all just like within a year of each other in Beirut. Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorists hijacked Kuwaiti Airways Flight 221 en route to Pakistan, diverting it to Tehran, where they brutally tortured and killed 2 American officials. June 85, Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorists hijacked TWA Flight 847 on its way from Athens to Rome, torturing a U.S. Navy diver before shooting him point blank in the head and tossing his body onto the Beirut airport tarmac. July 89, Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorists killed U.S. Marine Colonel William Higgins after kidnapping him the previous year while serving with the United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon. He was a peacekeeper. April 95, Iran-backed Islamic Jihad terrorists killed 8 people, including 1 American citizen, in a car bomb attack in Gaza. August 95, Iran-backed Hamas suicide bombers blew up a bus in Jerusalem, killing an American and 3 other passengers and wounding more than 100 others. February 96, an Iran-backed Hamas suicide bomber blew up another bus in Jerusalem, killing 3 Americans and wounding 3 other Americans. March 96, a suicide bomber linked to the Iran-backed Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist groups killed 20 people, including 2 Americans, in a suicide bombing in Tel Aviv. May 96, Iran-backed terrorists killed an American and Israeli dual citizen and wounded another American citizen in the West Bank. June 96, Iran-backed Hezbollah al-Hijaz terrorists killed 19 U.S. airmen and wounded 500 others in a truck bombing at a U.S. Air Force housing complex in Saudi Arabia. 97, Iran-backed Hamas suicide bombers blew themselves up on a pedestrian mall in Jerusalem, killing an American-Israeli dual citizen and wounding 7 other Americans. 98, Al-Qaeda suicide bombers facilitated by Iran-backed Hezbollah simultaneously bombed U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, killing 224 people, including a dozen American citizens. August 2001, an Iran-backed Hamas terrorist blew up a Jerusalem pizzeria, killing 3 Americans. 2002, Iran-backed Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade terrorist killed an American-Israeli dual citizen. July 2002, an Iran-backed Hamas terrorist killed 5 Americans. June 2003, an Iran-backed Hamas suicide bomber killed 17 people. This just goes on and on and on and on. 2007, former FBI agent Robert Levinson disappeared in Iran, likely dying in an Iranian prison. 2014, Iran-backed Hamas terrorists killed 2 American citizens serving the IDF. Iran-backed Hamas terrorists killed an American citizen and his wife in a drive-by shooting in the West Bank. This just goes on and on. 100 U.S. troops suffered traumatic brain injury because Iran attacked the Ain al-Assad air base in Iraq. Iran trying to kill our U.S. ambassador in South Africa. It just goes on and on. That's up to 2020. So for people who don't understand why the U.S. thinks Iran is a threat, that is what it's not that Iran is a threat. It's this regime is a threat. They've been attacking us nonstop since 79. When they came to power in 79 by kidnapping Americans, taking our embassy, kidnapping Americans, and holding them for over a year. So this kidnapping people and holding them for years at a time, this is nothing new for this regime. Sponsoring these proxy groups to literally kill Americans, as many as possible at times, through bombings of whole buildings. This is nothing new. So, okay, let's see. Flyveli Flomachenko says the world is a stage. Never participate in public plays. That is Iran-Contra. Yeah, Iran-Contra definitely happened. I remember as a kid it playing out on the news networks, just watching Oliver North up there trying to explain what was going on. This time we defunded the embassies and directed Americans to phone a phone number that tells our systems we can't help them get out. I'm no advocate of the horrific regime you describe. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody would look at this series of events since 79 and say like those are the good guys, right? And more importantly, it's not even a question of good guys and bad guys. It's just they've been killing Americans full time since 1979. So this is a little bit, I think that was a good sort of timeline of the regime's use of proxy groups to just murder Americans since 1979. But I wanted to go through that because a lot of people are too young to have really like heard that history and understand exactly the U.S. history with Iran. And of course, this doesn't cover the part that, led to 1979, Mossadegh and the Shah and Savak and all these things, and Khomeini getting tortured, going to France, coming back. There's a whole Cold War history there that happened before 1979. So not trying to pretend like that doesn't exist, but the history since 1979, makes it very clear why the clerical regime in Tehran is an enemy of the U.S. and always has been. Avowed enemy of the U.S. They get up in their legislative chamber and everybody chants death to America. There you go. It's been this way since 1979. But I hope everybody had a great weekend. I think there's very interesting stuff going on in crypto right now, not the least of which is, crypto's new best friend, AI, and what's happening on the AI front. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about on the AI front in the coming years. There's going to be a lot to talk about in terms of capital formation, sort of a new, less gray version of crypto capital formation over the next coming years. And probably if Brian Armstrong and those guys have their way, a lot of it happening on the centralized exchanges instead of out in the feral wilds of crypto, like we've been doing it for the last 10 years. Not me or you necessarily, but all of crypto as a space. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to be happening in the next couple of years. Of course, the next few months are going to be interesting in Cardano because of all the weird governance stuff that'll be going on. But I don't think any of us will be bored. I hope you all had a great weekend. I hope you're looking forward to a great week, and I will talk to you soon.